Hey guys, Todd Tucker here. I'm the broker in our East Cobb office, and I just wanted to go through the exclusive buyer brokerage agreement with you real quickly so you can understand how to complete that form. Now, the first part of the form is going to be where you would enter in the buyer's name over here. So the buyer's name is going to be Buyer Bob, okay? And so you enter in that information, and if there's a second buyer, it could be Buyer Sally, okay? So you would enter in the buyer's information, and then you would also go through and enter in the broker's information. So the broker, obviously, is Berkshire Hathaway, Home Services, Georgia, Properties, and you would enter in that information. Now, the date of the agreement is going to be the date that you're meeting with the buyer or the first meaningful conversation. We always suggest that you have a buyer consultation or at least a sit-down information setting before you actually go out and show them property. So let's just say today it's July 20th, we'll enter in that date. As you'll go through the form, we suggest that you read the form from front to back a couple of times just so you understand and or know what you're talking about if they're asking you questions. Let's jump right to the term of the agreement. In most cases, a lot of our brokers and agents will recommend a 6-month agreement. So by the time you start looking today and you go through 6 months, so we might go to December or January, let's just say, we'll just pick a time frame there. But a good rule of thumb is 3 months to 6 months to put in those blanks. Now, some of the agents have asked us if this is the first time you're meeting with a client and they're hesitant about signing a form like this, what you could enter into is a 1-day agreement. So what you would do is say the term of this agreement shall begin on July 20th, 2017 and continue through July 21st on 2017. So that way you would have a 1 day that would protect you and would protect them during the time that you're out with them today. Now, at the end of the day, it's important to remember to adjust the expiration date. So if you get to the end of the day and feel like you can work with them again, let's go ahead and modify, that date and extend it out at that point 3 to 6 months down the road. But it's just a great way for you to kind of get to know them to get to know you, and say that, our company policy tends to be 3 to 6 months. Number 3, the broker's duties to the buyer. One of the things that you want to make sure that they understand is that you're assisting them and helping them in negotiating the purchase and sell agreement. You have a pre-printed real estate agreement and you want to have that ability to assist them and fill it out to their best liking and to their advantage, quite frankly, when they're purchasing the property. You will go through section 4, and this outlines all the buyer's duties. Basically, that they're going to only work with you because it is an exclusive relationship. They'll be available to answer your questions or seek advice and so forth. There is a fair housing disclosure, paragraph 5, that we don't discriminate based on the protected classes. And paragraph 6 is the retainer fee. In most cases, we don't charge a retainer fee. So what I would do is enter in NA or 0 in that blank, just so it completes the blank and it's not left undone. A retainer fee would only be, I've only seen it really used in a commercial transaction where they're doing a lot of research, maybe traffic counts, some statistical data. But I'll caution you, if you charge a retainer fee, I would probably charge the retainer fee to every client. Just for fair housing purposes, we want to treat every client the same way. You would go through, and I would think the most important section is section 7A. So this is the commission that you're going to put into the agreement. And if you read it, it says the buyer agrees that the broker shall be entitled to the selling commission at the closing of the transaction. What we want to make sure that you enter into is in a minimum percent of the sales price. In most cases, it is 3%. And if you read the line right below that the custom in Georgia is for the seller to pay these real estate commissions to the real estate brokers. So just make them aware. I would say if there's ever a dispute and you do not have a percentage entered into any of these blanks, you really have no case. So if the buyer were to default on this agreement and go through and buy another property without you, you really have no leg to stand on because you had no percentage entered into in this particular part of the agreement. So just make sure 7A, number one, I usually encourage my associates to check and enter in 3%. You would also say that it's your choice whether the buyer shall either make up any differences in that. So we just always use 3% and the buyer shall. On a separate leasing commission, it's typically 20 to 25% of first month's rent. So you might put in there 20% of the first month's rent, and you just fill that out and move forward. We go on through, there is a protection period and the commission. In most cases, I'm going to recommend a minimum of 90 days. I feel like 30 days is too short. If someone waits till the agreement expires and then they go and buy a house, you're outside of that period. So what I would make sure we do is put something that, is going to be substantial, a minimum of 90 days in that blank. Now, you'll go through other limits of authority and responsibility. Basically that we can show property to other interested buyers, we can have multiple clients, owe no duties to the buyer or have no authority on behalf of the buyer other than set forth in the agreement. So I would just encourage you to read that. Paragraph 10 really goes into all of our disclosures. 11 is we have to disclose any potentially fraudulent activities. And then 12 is our broker's policy on agency. And our company really does all forms of agency except sub-agency. So you would enter in sub-agency here. And a sub-agent is simply an agent that's, as an example, there's a listing agent and you would be the sub-agent of the listing agent. It's kind of confusing, but you all are working for the seller. And since the laws changed in Georgia, we do the buyer brokerage or buyer agency, so there's typically an agent on both sides. So sub-agency, we go in that blank as one that we do not. Dual agency disclosure is basically the disclosure saying if you have a listing and you're representing a buyer, that you're disclosing that it could potentially be dual agency to that particular client. Designated agency is where it's both Berkshire Hathaway on both sides, however, could be two separate agents, which I'm sure you're aware of. Everybody knows that you're independent contractors of the brokerage, so certainly check the independent contractor box and go through that. The number 16 paragraph talks about arbitration if there are entity disputes. 17 is your extension. 18 is our disclosure rule for any referrals that we might pay. 19, we don't really have any, or the buyer acknowledges that they develop interest in the property and that the broker really has no actual knowledge of the properties that we see. So it's a hold us harmless kind of piece there. 20 is the governing law of the state of Georgia, the survival of the agreement, the entire agreement, that it's a copyrighted GAR form, time is of the essence, and then brochures. Now in the brochures section, there's a couple of brochures that you can include to give to a buyer, and it really depends on the level of maturity of the buyer. So if they're a first-time home buyer, I would probably do, protect yourself when buying a home. If they're doing new construction, potentially protect yourself when buying a home that's being constructed. If it's buying a condo, you would do that. Most of the subdivisions in and around Atlanta have homeowners associations, so you want to make sure you include that. And then, of course, you can always include if it's a short sale situation or different types of agency, if they're brand new to the game and want to know, how the agency piece works. And then you also have the mold pamphlet. So just those are things that you can include really depending on the situation. And then go through and see the notices and any special stipulations that you might include in this section. Always go, and it would, because we entered this into the front, I did it in zip forms, it's going to have the buyers 1 and 2 name information filled out. You can further add their information here and make sure you add your brokerage information here, like your MLS office code, your brokerage firm number, which is H65591, your office phone number, fax number, your address, and make sure, most importantly, to enter in your Georgia real estate license number, so we have that on the contract as well. And make sure, most importantly, to upload this into the DocuSign transaction room. So it's a great place to store all of your documents for this particular transaction. So thanks so much for joining me, and good luck with your buyers.